Back together Saturday drew a bigger crowd than four Reds games this year, according to Charlie Goldsmith. Let's get into what went down on Saturday at Paul Brown Stadium.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Liscow. He's your host, James Rapien, coming to you from Paul Brown Stadium. It is Get Back Together Saturday as we record this episode, recapping the last couple days of practice as the Bengals are off on Sunday, getting you all of the big takeaways from those practices as the Bengals gear up for the preseason starting in less than 2 weeks now. Less than 2 weeks from the time you listen to this episode, there will be a football game played at Paul Brown Stadium. Still no Joe Burrow, but we do have an update there. Big day for Joe Mixon. We'll update you on the offensive line rotation as the Bengals continue to work in different combinations at right guard and right tackle as Alex Kappa and La'el Collins work their way back from injuries, and other standout notes from 2 more days of training camp practices, including the one that 28,283 Bengals fans took in at Paul Brown Stadium on Saturday. So that crowd, again, according to Charlie Goldsmith, more than the Reds have drawn at all but 4 games this year. And James, you mentioned this. Talk about evidence that it's a football town. I don't know what else we need. This is a preseason practice, and we got 28,000 plus fans out there. So big draw, and unfortunately no Joe Burrow, but this shows where the city's at with this team right now.
Foosball is not the devil in Cincinnati. We'll say that as the water boy reference, baby. It is very clear that it's a football town. I mean, they almost had 2,000 people at Friday's practice. And it's just bleachers and let's stand in the sun. And it's not necessarily pleasant, right? You know, it's a football practice. Football practice is hard. And just standing there isn't necessarily that fun, or sitting in bleachers. Obviously on Saturday, much different because it was inside Paul Brown Stadium. And Jake, I'm sure you've seen photos and stuff and videos, and I tried to post some. The lower bowl was basically full. Yeah. And I talked to fans on the concourse that were, hoping to get water, hoping to get this or that really quickly. And it was so packed that lines weren't short. And so that's a testament to how excited people were. More than anything is the fact that they were able to fill a lower bowl. And get this, just because you get the tickets to Back Together Saturday doesn't mean you need to go, right? They were free. You sign up, you're able to get them. Joe Burrow's not going to be there. Well, maybe he will be. I don't know. And so it's that part of it that I think is as impressive as anything. Is it's not like the people stayed home because there was there might have been an inkling that or a hope that Burrow maybe walks out onto the field. He did. And at the same time, over 28,000 showed up. So that's awesome. As far as Burrow's concerned, no timetable. Zach Taylor was really shying away from giving us any real information, any news. He did say that he's talked to basically Burrow's entire family during this recovery process. So I thought that was quite interesting. But we don't know when he's going to be back. So fingers crossed that it's in the near future.
Yeah, and it might make sense for that day to be Monday with an off day on Sunday. We'll see. Maybe by the time you listen to this episode, if you're listening to it on your way home on Monday and it's after the Bengals have practiced, well, there's another episode for you. Go listen to that because we'll have another episode very shortly after the Bengals practice on Monday. But right. Burrow might be back in the building at that point, but he might not be. And to Taylor's point, you don't want to rush a guy back from an internal organ surgery, as minimally invasive as it may or may not have been, probably was, and no reason to put a timetable on it. He's gotten in trouble in the past for putting timetables on things, as coaches do when they learn that. And that's why Marvin Lewis gave his weather analogies and never gave, specific timetables either. So we'll see Joe when he's back, when he's ready. And until then, I'm still unconcerned. And I think really no significant cause for concern. It would be great for him to get those reps. Obviously, that would be ideal, but a lot of time between now and that regular season opener. And it'll cool off a little bit between now and that regular season opener, James, or it might. Cincinnati weather, of course, sometimes not the most predictable thing, but Evan McPherson kicking a 65-yard field goal to conclude practice on Get Back Together Saturday. He attributed some of that to the weather, the ball compressing well, he said, in the heat. But from the videos I saw, easily, I think, had enough leg on it to get through the uprights from 70 yards. Of course, there's no intense field goal blocking attempts coming from the defense at this part of the training camp schedule of the program, but 65 yards with room to spare is a pretty exciting thing to see from your kicker at Paul Brown Stadium.
And the ball wasn't kicked low. Like, I don't think it gets blocked, right? Like, he's just got a leg, man.
Yep.
That dude's got, that Money Mac leg that you can only find on number 2. And it's wild. Here's what I want to point out, because everyone's going to know by the time you listen to this about the 65-yarder. You've probably heard some of Evan McPherson's comments. But when we talked to him after practice, and I said this to him, and I know Justin Tucker exists. I said, you're like the most popular kicker in the league. And here's why I said that, because I'm sure some people have heard that comment. And I know Justin Tucker exists. But this guy was doing high knees in the end zone. And not the end zone that I was at, the far end zone. And you hear the crowd get loud. And then suddenly the entire lower bowl is yelling, Money Mac, shooter, cheering, because the kicker is doing some high knees. And that is the part during the practice. It's like, oh, we see Evan. Yeah. Like, that's the part that's like wild to me is this kid. He's that talented. And at the same time, is this famous among Bengals fans, I would say at this point. The other thing that I think is fun is Mike Hilton was trying to bring Evan back a little bit and saying, oh, those are last year's stats. Yeah. And that's last year. Last year is last year. And I think that's good that these veterans are doing that. And Mike specifically, I like him a lot, that he's doing that to try to make sure that Evan McPherson's head doesn't blow up. Because I got to be honest, that would be really hard if you've been as good as he has. And you got reporters like me, doofuses, saying, hey, you might be the most famous kicker in the league. Yeah, that it might be hard for you not to have a giant head.
Without Joe Burrow there, think about the Bengals that are getting the biggest reactions from the crowd. Jamar Chase, there's a video of him eliciting screams from the crowd. The defensive line walking off the field after Friday's practice, turning around to see what the commotion was about. It was Jamar Chase. Today, Evan McPherson, Joe Mixon, always very popular, likes to play catch with fans in the stands, really good about signing things. And Burrow's not there, but obviously Joe Burrow, very popular. And Evan McPherson is probably the next guy. I don't know. Maybe there's somebody else on defense I'm not thinking of. Maybe Jesse Bates will cause quite a stir when he shows up, if he shows up, when he shows up at some point. Also worth noting, by the way, that Cal Adamitis was the long snapper on that field goal for Evan McPherson to close practice out. So Kevin Huber holding, Evan and Cal Adamitis snapping on the 65-yarder to close out Saturday's practice. But that was just the end of the practice, and we haven't even talked about what went down during the team portion, what fans saw, what has gone on with the offensive line rotation. So plenty more to get to as we cover Friday and Saturday's practices here. We'll get into that coming up next.
But first, a word from Dave. Look, we've all been in a situation at some point when we've been a little tight. Things were tight, and you needed a little change to get you through, whether it's a bill, whether it's filling up your gas tank. Dave can help you do just that. It's the banking app that can get you up to $500 instantly with extra cash. It's more money to fill your tank, buy a wedding gift, catch up on bills. There's no interest, no credit check needed. Millions of people have already downloaded the Dave app to get the financial relief they need, and you can too. So download the Dave app from the App Store right now. That's DAVE. Sign up for an extra cash account and get up to $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees apply. Banking provided by Evolve. Member FDIC. Future you will thank you with Dave.
James, plenty more to talk about, I think, with two practices since we last convened the Locked On Bengals podcast. I know on Saturday it was a standout day for Joe Mixon. Sounds like he had some big runs, was involved as a receiver out of the backfield. Also, a couple other injury updates we can hit with Mike Thomas avoiding anything severe. He was dressed and out there for practice on Saturday. And Jeff Gunter, the Bengals 7th-round rookie, was not as injured as was feared. Described as a tweak to the knee and not something as catastrophic as potentially an ACL or other major structural damage that would cause him to miss significant time. So dodged a couple bullets there on Friday. But Joe Mixon, where I started this segment, had a big day from what was observed, of course, on Saturday at Paul Brown Stadium.
He did, no doubt about it. Put on a show. Started by, addressing the crowd. Didn't say a ton. Started by leading the crowd in a Who Dey chant, and which obviously the crowd got pretty loud about. And then said, "Look, we want to get back to the Super Bowl and finish the job this time." And it's pretty much that simple. And I tweeted the video of him saying that. So if you missed it, you can check that out. But yeah, he's quite the showman. We'll say that, Jake. Running all the way to the end zone on runs where he certainly didn't have to pull up because he had gotten touched, and he just kept running all the way to the end zone, did his big step and dance that he does, and spun the ball. And, the crowd ate it up. Then the other time on the other side, NFL Network was here, and Tom Pelissero was taking a recording on his phone, and Mixon took the ball and put it right in Tom Pelissero's camera. So no, he's quite the showman. He was signing a bunch of autographs for the kids as well. And Joe Mixon is a guy that loves the crowd. I will say he did talk to the media on Friday for the first time since the Super Bowl, and talked about a couple of things. One, how much he wishes he would have been in there on that 3rd and 1 naturally. I tweeted out the full quote. Don't have it handy, so I don't want to paraphrase and get myself or misinterpret him. The other thing, though, that stood out to me, and the juicy thing, it's twofold. One, when he found out that Lyle Collins is going to be available, he called his agent and said, "We got to get him." Two, speaking of two, he's thinking about 2, not 1, but 2,000 yards, 2,000 rushing yards this year. So I thought that was bold, which you would expect that from a guy like Joe Mixon, who's as talented as he is. But he's confident, looks good, looks explosive, looks fast. It looks exactly how you'd want him to look at this stage of training camp.
Sounds like he's really excited for the additions on the offensive line. Has talked about the gaping holes that he expects to be opened up from, but 2,000 yards rushing would be very impressive for Joe Mixon. That would be a C-level change of significant degrees for this offense. When you look at Joe Mixon's career, last year was his career high in rushing yards at 1,205. Of course, his yards per carry down a bit from his best season, which was in 2018, when he averaged 4.9 yards per carry, and on higher volume, 4.9 yards per carry gets there. But for 2,000 yards, even if he's back to his career high, 4.9 yards per carry, that's 408 carries. So he would have to really bump that number up, I think. I don't think there's 408 carries coming for Joe Mixon in 2022. But if that average jumps up and he rips off some of those big runs, I forget who it was. I think one of the PFF guys had a chart of running backs in the NFL with yards before and after contact. And Bengals running backs in 2021 were either the 2nd or 3rd worst in yards before contact in 2021. And Joe Mixon's right up there. The Bengals running backs, it wasn't just Mixon, but Mixon's a big part of it. Bengals running backs were right up there in the top 5 to 10 in yards after contact. So you give him an extra 3 yards before contact, then you can start to have a very, very productive running game.
No doubt. And how big would it be if they did have that type of production, from Mixon? Now, 2,000 yards, honestly, I think something bad would have to happen for that to happen. Like, I don't want that to happen. It's a pass-first offense. That's what they are. And
you get 2,000 yards in a Tennessee Titans offense, not a Joe Burrow offense.
Which, by the way, Tennessee Titans will never win the Super Bowl that way. That literally never will they win. They just won't. Now, I guess if you had Derrick Henry with Joe Burrow, and then in the playoffs you flipped it and started throwing the ball around, then maybe you could, I guess. But that way doesn't work. So what I would say, and I don't even know how realistic this is, but he topped over 1,500 yards from scrimmage. How about you get to 2,000 yards total and 500 are through the air, and you're able to pull off the pass blocking game a little bit more? Like, that's the part. Like, I know he's flashy and all that stuff, but like, what do I want to see from Joe Mixon? I want him to know, him and Joe Burrow, I want them to be on the same page, and I want Joe Burrow to trust Joe Mixon fully. Not that he doesn't, but the coaching staff doesn't trust Joe Mixon fully in pass protection, which goes back to Super Bowl 56, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. So it's one thing to say, and I agree, Joe Mixon should have been in the game on 3rd and 1. But 3rd down, it's not like it was his down last year. It wasn't. And it hasn't been his down. And so that's the part of it where, yeah, I get it. You need to be in there, want to be in there. I also understand that, well, you're going to have to be better at pass protecting to be in there on more 3rd downs.
He also talked about advocating for himself in that situation. In that quote, he said that he should have spoken up. He said that he was getting involved in more 3rd downs and more 2-minute offense stuff in the playoffs. But at that point in the game,
I don't know if that's true, by the way.
Yeah, I also was thinking about that and whether or not that was true. But he did mention that he wanted to advocate for himself. Now, if he has the same amount of carries this year as last year and the running game is more efficient, say he gets up to 5 yards per carry instead of 4.1, then you get just about to 1,500. You're a little bit short. And if he is more involved in the passing game, and we've been talking about this since Joe Mixon came into the league and has a few more opportunities there, not just catching screen passes and passes in the flat on checkdowns, then 500 also seems doable. But those are two big ifs, I would say. And I'd say the bigger if is, does he get those chances in the passing game? Because they've been so consistent in the way he's been used over coaching regimes, between coaching regimes. And so that would be probably a bit more surprising, but it sounds like he was featured in the passing game on Saturday, had a nice one-handed catch in a relatively contested situation. And so when you're doing things like that, I mean, I know there's a quote floating around there from a while ago now. I think this is 3 or 4 years ago, that he needs to stop trying to catch the ball with one hand. But when you're doing that consistently, which I think he has done pretty consistently, you know, the pass blocking does have to come along, but hopefully he gets more opportunities as we talk about this for the 6th year of Joe Mixon's career.
Yeah, hopefully he earns more opportunities, but maybe not. Maybe he's not that. Maybe he's just not going to be this 3rd down, because he was really productive last year. 16 total touchdowns, 1,500 yards plus from scrimmage, like we mentioned. So, like, if you get that again, but it's more efficient, and they're just better on 3rd downs and short yardage situations, sign me up.
Yep.
Because then you know what that does? Because if they're better in short yardage and he's averaging more yards per carry and maybe doesn't get as many touches, I think that's the path to opening up this offense to new heights, right? And honestly, getting defenses out of the too high looks that they're going to see early, because that's what we'll see early on with Jamar and T and Tyler and Joe. They'll see if the Bengals are willing to take some of the underneath stuff and try to prevent that big, deep downfield passing game.
And we saw a little bit of that last year when the passing offense did at times have some issues. We saw some of that come against offenses that like to play out of those too high shells. They would often spin out of them and bring a safety down after the snap. But when you can punish that a little bit more by having more effective first level blocking from your offensive line, getting your running back to the second level a little bit more consistently. And Joe Mixon still has that acceleration, that burst, and the slipperiness to make your second level angles bad and to run through some tackles. Then you can't stay in that too high shell the whole game. Now, I think that a team like the Chiefs, if the Bengals get to that level of efficiency potentially, and don't quote me on statistics, maybe the Bengals were more efficient passing the ball last year, but when you include sacks, I think they weren't more efficient than the Chiefs passing the ball in 2021. But if you get to that level where you don't have those sacks and your passing offense is so efficient, then you get to the point where teams are saying, like the Bengals did to the Chiefs, we're gonna stay light boxes. We're gonna play 5-6 man boxes the whole game, and we don't care if you run the ball. Mm-hmm. You get to that point. If you can run the ball the way the Browns run the ball, for example, then you have a real lethal 1-2 punch. But that's very rare. I'll say that's very rare. But if the Bengals do get there, then this offense is absolutely taking a step that we haven't even really imagined, I think, quite yet. Coming up next, more to talk about from Back Together Saturday, James, and Friday's practice, some offensive line rotations we haven't mentioned. I saw Trey Flowers guarding a tight end. We'll wrap up coming up next.
BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs, whether it is the NFL, whether it is the Bengals and Joe Burrow's MVP odds or their chances of winning it all this season. You can do that, plus all the latest Major League Baseball, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, even golf. And with the MLB trade deadline, who knows? Maybe you want to start to wager on that. The Reds making a few trades. Where are you going to go? Where you're going to go to BetOnline. I hope you got that reference, Jake. BetOnline is the easiest and best way to wager on all your favorite sports. So don't delay. I've used them. You should too. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Are there options at BetOnline, I wonder, for first overall pick in 2023 MLB draft? Because we want to get a bet for Reds fans.
Wow.
They've got some work to do.
I'm glad you added to it. Yeah, that's mean, but it's true. So whatever.
They've got some work to do to get to that number one pick. But they're right there in trading Luis Castillo. Anyway, we're a Bengals podcast over here, James. I mentioned offensive line rotations. I mentioned Trey Flowers. Are there other very large, noteworthy topics that you want to hit here, James? As you've been there in person and certainly have seen more than I have.
No, I don't think anything noteworthy. Real quick on Evan McPherson, I just want to mention this. He did say, and I don't know if this got lost in the shuffle during the run to the Super Bowl, but Justin Tucker reached out to him. Did we ever know that? Did we know that? Were we aware?
Not that I recall, no.
Okay, so Justin Tucker reached out to him during the postseason, and then after they won the AFC Championship, and they've kind of formed a little bit of a relationship there. So I think that's really cool because the face of kickers is Justin Tucker. Like there's no denying that. Mm-hmm. And so the fact that Evan McPherson impressed him enough to, if you're a rookie and you impress LeBron enough, that's something, or insert whoever you want to say. Don't make this a LeBron thing, but you get my point. So I wanted to mention that. Other than that, I don't think so. Outside of this, Jake, you don't get to experience it as much as I do since I'm at camp every single day, but it's awesome seeing all the Locked On Bengals listeners and meeting them in person. And we've had meetups and stuff. And, next time Jake's in town, we'll do another one, but seeing everybody at training camp and everybody saying hi, it's really, really cool. And I need to be better at telling Jake about it because I think this is the first time I have since camp started. But yeah, a lot of our listeners have said hi over the past few days, Jake.
Well, there are 28,000 people there today. And I know what our listener numbers are. I'm sure most of them have heard us talk about the team they went to support at least once. And if you're listening, we, just to reiterate what James said, do appreciate all of you that do listen. And I look forward to seeing many of you again the next time I'm there. Let's go offensive line rotation next as we transition back to football here for a few minutes before we wrap up. Sounds like there have been different combinations every day, and I didn't see what happened on the right side of the offensive line on Saturday. I think they're out of new combinations they could realistically run out there with the first team, but on Friday it was different, right, James? And you can tell us what happened on Saturday as well.
So Isaiah Prince was at right tackle, Cordell Volson at right guard, and I believe that was the case again on Saturday.
Okay.
Now, full disclosure, when I was down there shooting stuff, it was hard to see, believe it or not. We were stuck on one end zone, so I couldn't necessarily see. There were some riders that went up. Me, naturally, I'm doing the YouTube thing, so I had to stay down and take some video too. And you can't shoot from the press box because you'll see the whole field. So, but yeah, I believe it was those two. But we've seen, you're right, every combination. And I wouldn't be shocked if we see a couple of more. It's the other thing while we're talking about the offensive line, Frank Pollock talked Friday and praised Jackson Carman, was really effusive in his praise of Jackson Carman, how in shape he was, how well he was doing. So we'll see, because that was the big hole. That was the big question mark, right? And it seems like La'el Collins is going to be fine, that Alex Kappa is going to be fine. And so Ted Karras, Jonah Williams, Collins, Kappa, good to go, and all but those one spot. It seems like Carmen's, the favorite right now, and in the clear favorite, I think. But Cordell Volson could be behind him since he's getting reps at right guard.
Yeah, it sounds like it was a big offseason for Jackson Carman. Judging from Frank Pollock's comments, came into camp in significantly better shape, night and day. he said that Carmen would have laughed at you and said he learned a valuable lesson after his rookie year, after rookie year training camp. I did just watch a clip, James, to try to verify what was happening on the right side of the offensive line in practice. To me, it looks like 77 at right guard. It does look like Isaiah Prince at right tackle. So Hakeem Adeniji and Isaiah Prince may have been the combo today, at least on this particular play, which is I'd say 15-yard or so comeback to Jamar Chase in front of Chidobe Awuzie. But and I want to credit Taylor Cornell really quick for that clip. I appreciate those of you out there who are getting the clips on Twitter at training camp. Hasn't been as much of that this year. I think they've wisened up, James. As you said, they're putting the players away from the stands a little bit, making those videos a little bit harder to capture in general. But I think that seems like the likely backup duo to me so far. Checked. I'd say it's Adeniji and Prince.
Yeah, I just checked again, and I do see Adeniji in there with the first team. So there we go. So Volson getting his shots, which I think is great news. Deontay Smith getting his shots. Again, I think that's fantastic to get these guys work because they're working with the starters for a backup role. And of course, many of these players had significant reps last year, such as Hakeem Adeniji and Isaiah Prince. And at times, those weren't the best reps. At times, they were okay. And I know we've talked about this, and I know a lot of Bengals fans are excited for the new thing because they're scarred by the old thing that wasn't as good last year. But I'm excited to see all these guys in preseason games, to see how their games have developed, to see how their offseason work has gone, because I believe Adeniji, Prince, and Carmen perhaps all worked with the same trainer this offseason. I don't remember the exact combination, but I do know that multiple offensive linemen were working with the same offensive line offseason training group. It was Adeniji, Carmen, and actually Deontay Smith, not Isaiah Prince, working with the same trainers. And it sounds like Adeniji in particular impressed some of the guys he was working with out there. So give him a shot to show what he's got this preseason. Yeah, and right now we have Hakeem Adeniji 2 days, Cordell Volson 2 days, Isaiah Prince 3 days, and Deontay Smith 1 day. For those keeping track of that. The other thing, by the way, Frank Pollock really big on Ted Karras. Loves Ted Karras, big Ted Karras guy. And just so we're recording this obviously after practice on Saturday, but I know Ted Karras invited some teammates to watch some fights on Saturday night. So that's he's bonding with some of the guys. And it wasn't just offensive linemen. I think he was inviting a couple defensive linemen too. So that's good on his end for pulling that off. And who knows how many went, but still cool.
Absolutely makes sense, by the way, that Frank Pollock would love Ted Karras, because Ted Karras is a future Frank Pollock. Those guys are going to be peers when Ted Karras is coaching the offensive line in 10 plus years, or whenever he gets into it. Maybe he'll go work for Frank Pollock somewhere in the future, or be working for Frank Pollock in Cincinnati. Who knows where the future will take us. Any other notes from practice on Saturday or Friday that we need to hit here, James?
Puka Williams has missed the past couple days.
Okay.
Not exactly sure what, but he's missed practice a couple of days. So we'll monitor that. He's been out there, just hasn't worked. Outside of that, I don't really think
Kwame
so.
Lassiter is getting some looks at punt returner, especially with Puka being away. So Kwame Lassiter getting a few looks there, perhaps with Puka Williams' absence. Was Mitchell Wilcox any change in his status that you noticed on Saturday?
Nope.
Okay. Some extra opportunities then for Thaddeus Moss.
Yep.
All right. Well, we've made it through the first week of Bengals training camp. We've celebrated getting back together on Saturday at Paul Brown Stadium, which may be called something else. Do you think we're going to get that by week 1?
Yeah.
No developments there in the last week.
I don't even know why. I don't even know why this is a debate. I literally talked to Mike Brown right before we started recording.
Good.
You know what
you bought the naming rights?
I'm going to break the news. Built Bar Field at Paul Brown Stadium. Oh, it's done. It's over. No, I'm telling you, it's done.
I didn't know you were that close with the Built Bar people. I mean, I knew you were a big customer.
I just figured I'd break the news now here on Locked On Bengals.
We need to put a disclaimer. We need one of those scrolling disclaimers.
Obviously, it's funny. All right. Obviously. Come on. Yeah.
Don't sue us for defamation,
I went
Cincinnati
up
Bengals.
I went up to one of the there's a new PR person for the Bengals, and he's really nice. But I can like say stuff with I could be like, Built Bars are literally going to buy the naming rights to Paul Brown Stadium, and I'll say it with a straight face. And you know that, and a lot of our listeners know that, and people around me. And I was like, oh, so I can go out anywhere in the end zone, right? Because he said, you got to stay here in the end zone. I was like, oh, out there in the end zone. And he was like, no, this yellow line. And like, and I was like, dude, I'm just kidding. I know. But like, so yeah, Built Bar. I don't want to throw people off with the Built Bar, but Built Bar Stadium sounds bad. BetOnline Stadium.
Who knows?
Dave Stadium. Locked On Bengals Stadium.
Yeah, there it is. I thought you had bought the naming rights to the stadium for our podcast. That's what I was.
Locked On Bengals Stadium?
Sure.
Or Locked On Bengals Field at Paul Brown Stadium?
Also fine. I'll take either. That's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. The Bengals are back to work on Monday. Maybe we'll see Joe Burrow. Maybe we won't. Either way, the Bengals will be back at work, and so will we. Until next time, Bengals fans, thanks for listening to the Locked On Bengals podcast. If you need more NFL action, you can always check out Locked On NFL. Until next time, hoo day, and have a good one.